In this video series, I am building out the ultimate DIY aeroponic garden. This thing started as an aeroponic cloner, then moved to a fully aeroponic garden with the last video, and today we're going to add fog, making it a fogponic, aeroponic, hydroponic ultimate garden. Also, make sure you check out the guide for this. I'll have linked up in the description box below. I also have a bunch of other guides on my website that are totally free and they'll be a great resource for you. So make sure you check all that stuff out too. I looked in my root chamber the other day and I noticed that a lot of roots are settling down towards the bottom of the bucket. And that's okay, they'll be fine down there. But really, I would rather them fill out the whole bucket to allow more air to flow between the roots, because if they all just bundle up at the bottom of the bucket, they're not really taking that much advantage of the aeroponic aspect here. So what I want to do is encourage more roots to shoot out from the sides. And the way that I'm going to do that is add fog. So with the addition of fog, what it's going to do is suspend the molecules of water and nutrients in the air, thus allowing root respiration to happen far more than it would if it was just sitting in water, and they're going to grow out towards the sides. With fogponic gardens, same with high pressure aeroponic gardens, you get really beautiful root hairs that start to develop more horizontal root structures rather than vertical root structures. And as we can see from this, it's pretty vertical right now. It's just going all the way down to the bottom of the bucket. There isn't really a ton of roots coming out the side. So we're gonna make these changes in today's video, and then I'm gonna make a follow-up video, so make sure you're subscribed for that one too. So to do this and to keep it fully aeroponic, now I'm gonna have two nutrient reservoirs to consider. I've got this reptile fogger, so I'm gonna use this to just pump the fog into the top of the bucket. And now I have to keep the nutrient reservoir on the fogger filled as well. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and mix up the nutrients in a separate 1 gallon container here. And I'm gonna keep in mind when I'm filling up the fogger, you have to treat them a little differently than any other garden. Because the ceramic plate is really fragile, that creates the ultrasonic vibration that actually creates the fog. I'm not gonna put any heavy nutrients in. I'm only gonna use my grow formula and a little bit of the bloom formula and just hydrogen peroxide, and that's all I'm gonna put in the fogger. I'm not gonna put any of my macronutrients, and I'm gonna try to go lighter with my calcium, because calcium builds up and can ruin these ultrasonic cloners a lot faster. I'm also gonna try to load a lower EC, an overall parts per million, than I would in the aeroponic reservoir. This is for the same reason, and also the fog really isn't to deliver nutrients to the roots as much as it is to increase that root respiration, to get those root hairs to develop, and to get the roots to grow out from the sides rather than just straight up and down. So my goal here really is to fill this bucket with aeroponic roots. So I got my nutrients mixed, and before I do anything, I'm gonna check the EC, and it looks like it's a little bit too high. So now I'm gonna dump some water out and dilute it with some more water. And there we go, that's perfect. Okay, now I'm gonna check my pH. And that's right in the sweet spot. I'm looking for a pH between like 5.7 and 6.1, so 5.9 is perfect. So now one thing to consider with the fogger and the maintenance here is every time you take off the top to refill it, you should wipe down the ceramic plate with a soft cloth. I'm just using a paper towel right here to make sure you get any residue off of it. This little plate vibrates at an ultrasonic frequency, and that's what creates the actual fog itself. So if this is unable to vibrate at that frequency, then it's going to create issues. It'll overheat and it'll burn out, and the fogger won't work anymore. I've had this happen with several foggers while working with fogponics, and I know just how fragile these can be. So every time you refill your nutrient reservoir, just give this a little wipe down. In fact, go ahead and just wipe out this whole container to make sure that we're not going to get any residue built up. The more we can keep this fogger clean, the less issue we're gonna run into, and the better it's gonna perform. Okay, so now we'll put the nutrient reservoir back on top with our nutrients in there, test out the fogger, and I want it turned up all the way, and then I'm gonna get my timer. So I'm gonna set this for half an hour on and 1 hour off. It's pretty much impossible for me to be able to actually time this up with the timer for my low pressure aeroponic garden, because these little cheap timers, if you actually compare them to one another, I've tried to have 2 timers that were set exactly the same, and they would never turn on at exactly the same time, and then eventually they were completely out of sync with each other. So I'm not even gonna bother trying to set my fogponic timer to the same as my aeroponic timer. I'm just gonna know that the fog is in there, and the fog remains in there for quite some time. It's pretty dense fog, and it'll hang out and keep the environment at a really high humidity, whether the aeroponic pump is running or not. The cool thing about this reptile fogger is that it has this extendable pipe that comes right out of the top. This is actually a really perfect fogger to use for this application. I've previously done deep water culture fogponic gardens where I'll do a DWC on the bottom and then a fogger on the top to just have like a layer of fog. And those are pretty cool, but as I mentioned in the last video, I want this to be fully aeroponic with no standing water that the roots are gonna be in. I want the roots to just be in air. All right, so let's get this all set up. I first was gonna put it inside this bucket that my fan's sitting on top of. But once I did that, I realized it would be really hard to keep an eye on the reservoir. I'd have to take the fan off. It would kind of be a pain. Plus, the heat from the actual tent itself would heat up this reservoir much quicker. So what I'm gonna do, because I have the option with extending this hose, is run the hose into the tent and I'm gonna set it just on this chair outside the tent. And then I'm gonna run it into the center of this pool noodle and put it right into the top of the bucket. I'm gonna let it run for a few minutes and then I'll take the plug out and show you guys what it looks like with all that fog in there. Okay, so it's been running for about 3 minutes. Let me take the plug out and see if I can slide my phone in here and get a shot of this reservoir. And that is nothing but fog. I can't see anything. All right, you can see the net cup there, but the rest of it is just dense fog. My hope is that this fog is gonna get all those little roots coming out of the bottom of the net cup to grow to the side instead of just growing straight down. And my next video will be an update showing those roots. All goes well. Also keep in mind, these roots are never supposed to be getting saturated, completely soaked. It's supposed to be like a mist of water. That's why we're blasting it towards the top of the bucket and allowing that to diffuse the water into smaller particles. And actually most of those just go up to the top and hit the side and then come down, and it's only a very small amount of spray that actually hits the roots with this particular system that I created. So the addition of the fogger is going to fill in even more of those gaps, and I really can't wait to report back and show you guys these aeroponic roots and how they've taken off in just a couple weeks. Also make sure you check out the guide for this. I'll have linked up in the description box below. I also have a bunch of other guides on my website that are totally free and they'll be a great resource for you. So make sure you check all that stuff out too. See you next week in the next video. Let's grow together.